Okay, I think we're good to go. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Ian McKechnie. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships at the Advanced Services Group at Aston Business School in Birmingham in the UK. We have a 1 hour session today on women in servitization. We've got some fabulous speakers, but I thought perhaps just giving you a bit of insight about the agenda, the topics that we intend to look at, and the context behind our session. So we have myself and Paula. Paula is co-host, and she'll be talking about servitization as an opportunity for business growth. We then have Kate Rattigan from Domino Printing Sciences, and we have Nancy Easterbrook from Happiston Walker International, which is part of the Calderis Group. And then towards the end of the webinar, we'll have approximately 15 minutes to deal with questions and answers in one group session. Please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to post questions as we go through the webinar. And then Paula and I will collate and we'll deal with these towards the end. And then we'll have the closing remarks in approximately 1 hour's time. The reason for the webinar is colleagues, Professor Tim Baines, Professor Ali Bigdeli, and Dr. Kawal Kapoor wrote a fabulous book called Servitization Strategy. And it was decided to take it on a Six Nations tour. So it went to Scotland, England, Wales, Ireland, France, and Italy. And I posted a picture of the group at the book launch dinner in Dublin. And within a couple of days, I had two people contacting me. One was Abby Hurd, who I know of old, and her colleague, Nicole Ballantyne. And they called me out because there were no women represented in the picture. And their query to me and the challenge to me was, is this representative of what we see within the servitization or the business model landscape? And it couldn't really be further from the truth. However, it was a good call to action to allow us to think about it and to bring some specialists together to give a wider audience a chance to find out what women in servitization really do. So this is the group that Abby and Nicole coordinate with some other colleagues. It's called Inspiring Women in Manufacturing. They invited me to join it, which I was pleased to do, and I was, I think, member 315. They've now added another 14 members since that point. But please feel free to reach out to them. They're a fantastic group, and it's all about inspiring women in the manufacturing landscape. So today's speakers, we have Paula, we have Kate, and we have Nancy. Paula looks after partnership development and operations within the Advanced Services Group, and they coordinate a global program of support for OEMs looking to add more services to support the products in use. And we have Kate from Domino Printing Sciences and Nancy from the Calderis Group. So I'm going to hand over to Paula now to give a quick overview of servitization. Then we'll bring in Kate to hear Kate's journey, and then we'll bring in Nancy to hear her story, and then we'll go to the Q&A function. But just as a reminder, please use the Q&A facility at the bottom of the screen. Paula, over to you.
Thanks very much, Ian. Just making sure you can hear me. Yeah, lovely. Very good to see you all. Hope you're having a good day. I'm going to spend 5 minutes introducing the Advanced Services Group. And for those of you that aren't aware, a very brief introduction to advanced services and servitization to get us started. A little bit about me, first of all. I've been working with the Advanced Services Group for about 5 years. I joined to run their SME programme for manufacturing businesses in the West Midlands. But prior to that, I've been working in and with the manufacturing industry for many years, mostly with larger businesses in the automotive industry, so Jaguar Land Rover and Fiat, Caterpillar, etc. And in fact, that history does go quite a way back. I counted it up this morning, 30 years. And I can tell you that 30 years ago, in 1994, the manufacturing industry looked quite different if you're a woman in it. Not many women on the shop floor, not many women in the meeting rooms, and particularly in the boardrooms. Well, things have changed quite a bit, haven't they? So we hope today that those of you who are here are going to gain some real good insights into advanced services. And particularly for the women in the attendance, we're hoping that you will get some inspiration from our speakers and also gain some insights into how understanding advanced services and servitization will help to differentiate yourself in the workplace and hopefully as we look forwards to you being in the boardroom. So about the Advanced Services Group then, we are a boutique consultancy. We offer niche specialist support on advanced services and servitization. And the reason why it's specialist is because it's all based on research, good academic research. And our research is particularly special because it's all applied. It's all tested and piloted with industry. So we know that it's successful and the tools and models that we use can have real impact. And we deliver those tools and models through partnering. So we have a global partnership, as Ian mentioned earlier, of organisations that are working to develop their services offer longer term. We offer advisory support, which are one-off assignments where businesses are looking to propel themselves forward, again, looking at the services agenda. And we also offer training. So that can be anything from individual training courses to masterclasses on the design and the adoption of advanced services. And here are some of the businesses that we've worked with. So you can see there are a lot of very big global businesses who are interested in this, who can see that it has real relevance for them in terms of their continued offer. And also there are a number on there that we can't mention because they're covered by NDAs. And the reason they're covered by NDAs is because these businesses recognise that competitively, servitization, moving towards advanced services, offers a significant competitive advantage. So they don't want their competitors to know that they're working on it. So let me tell you a little bit about what servitization is. This is one of our key models developed by our academics and refined in working with businesses. It's called the servitization staircase. There's quite a lot of detail in here. Not going to go into a huge amount of detail right now, but I would strongly encourage you to have a look at our website. As a starter, there are some fantastic short animations that will give you other snapshots behind some of the detail here. And we'll also talk about other resources you can call on. But at its very heart, servitization is about business model innovation. And it's about innovating the business from outputs and ownership, as you can see at the bottom left here, up to outcomes and usership. So away from outputs and towards outcomes. And this is critical to many businesses that are looking to either differentiate themselves or who are suffering from commoditization in the workplace, or are just looking to offer that extra something to their business because they can feel they're moving in that direction already. You can see we've separated them into three areas. So at the very bottom, where it's very product-based. In the middle, where we have intermediate, which is all about maintenance and performance. Right up to those top three in the advanced services area, where you can see it repeats itself. We guarantee the incomes, outcomes, I beg your pardon, and we guarantee the outcomes. It's all about outcomes, ultimately. Why are businesses interested in this? It's about that differentiation. It's about customer intimacy. It's about longer term revenue streams. And if you want probably the best and possibly the most well-known example of advanced services, you can think about Rolls-Royce, who instead of selling just the engine, now also sell the offer as a power by the hour offer, where you're purchasing a number of hours in the air. I'm sure the other speakers will talk to you a little bit more detail about that very shortly. So thinking about the journey that you go on in order to reach the very top of that staircase, we know that there are four key stops along the way. First of all, about exploring how you're going to do that for a business. So how are you going to build the stakeholder group? How are you going to get coalition? How are you going to have those internal discussions and what kind of resources you're going to need in order to make this happen? Then you start to engage more widely within the business so that you can demonstrate that there is value here, so that you can understand and hypothesize how it might work for you longer term. Then you look at the rollout. So that's where you move to expansion. How are you going to strengthen this offer? How are you going to invest that offer? And this is the stage where we find a lot of our businesses are making the more difficult decisions. They're having to be quite bold and ambitious. And then finally through to exploitation, where you're starting to recognize the benefit this is having to the business and then adjust in order to meet the market needs and respond further to your customers' requirements. So as I mentioned earlier, you're probably going to want to think about looking for other resources to expand your understanding of this, because I know you want to hear our speakers. So can I refer you to our servitization playbook and our new strategy? Oh, we're zooming forwards here. Sorry about that. So we've got our new book, which was published earlier this year by Professor Tim Baines and Ali Bigdeli and Kawal Kapoor, which is available at servitizationstrategy.com. And also the Servitization Playbook, another very popular publication. This provides some of the more detailed information and inspiration about how you can go about following an advanced services journey. So that's a very quick whistle stop. We know that you want to hear our speakers. We're very happy to talk to you at the end or outside of this. We're going to pass over to Kate Rattigan now from Domino Printing Sciences.
Thanks, Paula. Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining. I'd like to tell you a little bit about my own personal experiences of working in servitization. I'll start with a quick introduction to Domino, where I work today with a fantastic team of commercial and technical specialists to help bring advanced services to our customers. We've been a partner of the Advanced Services Group for a few years now, so I think some listeners will be very familiar with our business, but essentially my work is in the coding and marking division, which is about printing relatively small format, variable data like barcodes, traceability information and things onto primarily packaging and other parts. I was lucky enough to join the company back in 2020 when there was already some exploration work around customer outcomes. But since then, we've really moved into that expansion stage that Paula just mentioned. And we've reached several major milestones, like calling out a strategic commitment to move into services that enable customers to meet their goals. We've formed a dedicated team and developed our first service offer that we're now taking out to customers. When I was asked to speak, I really thought about what were the skills and experiences that helped me in this role so that I could perhaps share some of that with you. And certainly I've never had until now a job title with advanced services in it. In fact, Domino's very much the first company to use this sort of language of servitization. But what I have found is that reflecting back, many of my employers were moving in that direction, diversifying into services of some kind, even if not outcome based. But the language that they were using really often masked that, because what you'll see here is a history of product marketing, product management, even when my focus was actually on launching and selling services. So it's clear from my experience that service development is a common growth opportunity for businesses, even if that's not explicit from those businesses. Now, you've heard just now about some of the benefits of servitization in future-proofing your business, and you may be looking to do this because, like Domino, you're operating in an increasingly competitive landscape. Well, hopefully you also see the personal benefits of working in this field that are going to help you to future-proof yourself in much the same way. Because we're all operating now in this competitive world where people can work remotely and the pool of job applicants has suddenly become much greater. And in some cases, even technology is starting to become a competing resource. So I just wanted to highlight that the experiences we gain in service development, like gaining a deep understanding of your customers and using insights to create new value propositions and exploring new market opportunities that could have quite uncertain results. Those sorts of things are increasingly relevant in this competitive world and make you a valuable asset that companies want to retain. You could even go so far as to say that if you take an outcomes-based approach to your work, then you should be achieving more of your goals rather than simply turning up and perhaps providing a variable overall equipment effectiveness. So what has all of this taught me about, excuse me, the advice that I can share with others that are working in this field? Well, as you saw from my potted history, I came from a commercial background into product management, and I found marketing to be a relatively female-heavy function. So it can be a comfortable way in for other women in business. I think this gender bias is at least in part because marketing revolves around a level of empathy and intuition, and not intending to overgeneralize. These are typically female traits. And in case you're interested, there is some science behind this. So, you know, the difference comes from the lower testosterone in early brain development, and it allows for a greater ability to understand others' feelings. And hopefully that then translates into understanding the purchasing motivation for your brand of printing equipment. Empathy and intuition are obviously useful characteristics in many roles, but certainly for service design. So I think really marketing is quite a logical route in. Certainly it has been for me. And that background's given me some abilities around communications, market positioning, pricing, and certain other activities that are quite relevant. And really, this is also how I first started working with customers to uncover their goals, their challenges, translate those into what the requirements that there might be for a new product or service launch into the market, what would be the requirements to feed into specifications for development teams. And initially, when I was doing this sort of activity, it was very product centric. So the questions that you'd ask a customer would typically revolve around specific performance characteristics and features that they wanted to see. More recently in the Domino world, with the benefit of having some partner organizations and some tried and tested tools to draw on, I've benefited from things like the Aston Guide to creating a customer value proposition. And really that's helped to reshape what we call the voice of customer process. Now, rather than going in at that very specific product focus, we're using a much broader set of questions that's aimed at considering the wider business context. And those sorts of questions uncover far greater opportunities for more ambitious service offers that are more future focused. You know, they're more valuable to the customer and to Domino. So it's really game changing to focus on different sorts of customer challenges and understand what the customer's business might look like in years to come, rather than getting bogged down in marginal improvements to your existing service or product offers. Now, I would recommend certain other tools that I've come across. Highly recommend the business model guide, and I mentioned, you know, experience of pricing that's helped me in my role, but it often is specific to a particular type of product or service that you might be providing. And what the Aston Guide offers is this look at commercial models that are very relevant to us in advanced services. So it's things like pay-per-use, pay-per-product, pay-per-hour, different types of models. And these specific tools can really help to add to your existing knowledge and apply it to new services. I think as a woman, as an introvert, one of my special skills has been listening. So that's proved absolutely critical in being able to understand customer needs. And that's an area I've really applied myself to throughout my career. Very useful in marketing, in market intelligence, in service development. what I've probably struggled more with, less around specific skills, but I'd say that certainly very much so in the early days of my career, my main challenge was probably my self-confidence. I saw my older, more experienced colleagues who often came from a technical background, which gave them something that I didn't have and felt that I therefore was lacking, as having more valid opinions than my own. And I remember going back to my first role, desperate to fit in, often, well, in that case, within a very male-dominated industry, I found myself feeling the need to wear pinstripe suits and cufflinks and really try to blend in as much as possible. And I don't know that that actually changed the way that I was perceived by my colleagues, to be honest with you. It certainly made me feel that much more confident. And I expect it was the self-belief that actually helped to boost my acceptance and my career. So I know it can be hard for many, especially younger people, especially young women, to find their voice. And so my advice to others is do whatever works for you, whether that's wearing a suit or taking a presentation course, reading a self-help book or finding a mentor within your organization. All of those things can really help to give you the self-belief. And I'd say that's really critical in servitization in particular, because when you're working on such a major business transformation, you're not always going to have the support of all of your colleagues, or the evidence that you're doing the right thing. You might be working on an untested offer towards an untested market. And what's going to get you there is a certain level of self-belief to carry you through the uncertainty, give you the chance to prove yourself and prove your ideas and your new value propositions to your colleagues and to the market. So I would just leave you really with a message to, good luck in your own personal journeys, and hopefully some of this might provide some inspiration to you along the way. I'll leave it there for now, and I'll hand over to Nancy Easterbrook to share some of her experiences with you.
Thank you, Kate. That certainly resonated with me. I don't see the presentation, though. It did not come over to me. I don't have it.
Christina, can we just change and check the screen? We're not seeing the PowerPoint slides. Just bear with us, please, and we'll get this sorted. That's it, Christina. Thank you.
Okay, let me see if I have control of it. All right, it looks like I do. So thanks to Kate for a story that I think many of us are going to be able to relate to. Hopefully my story will also help you to understand what it might be like to walk through a career in servitization. And if I would describe myself at all, just as a label to myself, I would say I'm a corporate entrepreneur, and I've always have been from the earlier parts of my career, but always inside a fairly large company. Everything from envisioning what the future could look like to starting to create that, building and growing it, and delivering it at scale with the dollars attached. Throughout that journey as a career creator and builder, I have observed that servitization has been a thread that has run through not only my own commercially successful innovations, but many of those in industrial B2B, which is where I've spent most of my career. Of course, we never called it servitization. That's a new word. Servitization I'm seeing as becoming a very necessary skill set for anybody that's in the creating and building areas, such as in R&D, marketing, commercial functions, and strategic functions. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey with a few vignettes, servitization vignettes that predated my current challenge that I'm working on with Harbison Walker. I'm a chemical engineer. I came from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and my first job was in a company called Air Products, which was an industrial gas company. And I wanted to mention this in this call because for people interested in servitization, this would be a lead user story, an industry that had extreme needs and developed what they don't call servitization, but what we call it now, much before, decades before it became a byword and something that people were working on. So the thing about industrial gases, which are things like oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, is they're hard to differentiate based on being products because they're diatomic molecules. It's super difficult to make your nitrogen any different or any better than anybody else's nitrogen. So the industry from the get-go had to find a different way of making themselves special. And they did that based on value and use. That is, understanding what the customer needed to achieve and using industrial gas products to help them achieve that. The other thing that was simultaneously going on and was an extreme need is that those gases are sold as cryogenic liquids by and large. And if there's one thing an industrial gas hates, it's to be a cryogenic liquid. It really wants to be a gas and it will do everything it can to become that. So if it does that before the customer has got it and used it, then they pretty much would have paid for something that they didn't get. And if you, the manufacturer, lose it, well, then you don't get paid for your product. So this was an extreme need. And way before there was internet or digital or wireless, this industry had created a supply chain that was highly automated. And through telemetry and physical measurements, created a way of receiving your gas as a customer that you never had to order it. It was pretty much there the way you turn on the lights in the home. So this was a very successful story, and you might think that a commodity like nitrogen or oxygen or hydrogen might be low margin. But because the industry did this early on, long ago, it has margins that many, especially chemical, would be proud to get if they could get that. And this was my baby food and where I cut my teeth. I did not start in a company that had a product-centric mentality. And I walked along through my career many steps. But the next vignette I want to tell you about is when I was leading the segment we called CPI, and that stands for Chemical Process Industries. So it might not surprise you that a company that gains value by doing applications would divide by segments and industries, and that's how we did it. But it might surprise you that we were not selling that value approach to the chemical process industries like we were in others. And the reason why, there was a very strong internal belief or mythology that CPI buyers were price buyers only, that you could offer them value, but they would not pay for it. So I was asked to come in there and grow this industry from a revenue point of view, from a pretty large base, by the way, because they are large, and increase the margin. It was one of our lowest margin sectors. Really, the way to do this was to apply the mentality that we had in other segments to the CPI. It turns out that if you don't give anybody any reason to be anything other than a price buyer, then they will be a price buyer. So creating that value was the first step, and it was a servitization journey, but one where we actually had a set of products that were developed for other industries, but could be moved over to the CPI. Just as an example of one application out of many would be cryogenic grinding. So many CPI companies do particle size reduction as part of their unit ops, and it includes a lot of very intractable materials that don't want to be ground up, and nitrogen, especially liquid nitrogen, can be used to embrittle that material so that it becomes glassy. Then it will fracture. You can grind it in certain types of grinding mills, get it to the particle size and morphology that you need for your end use. And customers could not do this. This was outside of their organizational skills because it was so esoteric. Who really knows about cryogenics other than industrial gas companies? Who understands the special grinding equipment that goes along with that? The process technology that has to go along with that, and the needs. So we were able to come in there with a mentality like that, laser focus on what the customer was trying to deliver. And since this is a long time ago, I can tell you that over a 5-year period of time, we grew that industry from a pretty large base to a factor of 5 more in revenue by using the servitization type approach. And the margin went from the bottom to the second highest margin of any industry sector that we served in the company. So that's a servitization story where we know where it went. I'd like to cover one more vignette before coming up to the present day, and that's just a story from Buckman Labs. It's more recent, but we do know how that one ended up as well. So Buckman makes cooling water chemicals. And cooling water comes from cooling water towers. It's used in all kinds of buildings like hotels or large buildings, and also in most manufacturing plants to cool down process temperatures. And it's an extremely manual, painful thing to manage. Some people have 17 cooling towers on a site, and they have to physically go throw chemicals in there. So
right. I'm gonna go to
I think we're hearing a voice in there. But anyway, I'll just go on and say that this is very manual, very painful, and very time consuming. And the consequence of getting it wrong is actually Legionnaire's disease. And that's a fatal illness that you can get from bacteria that develop in a cooling water tower. So the opportunity with the development of digital and automated solutions is to put a probe into the cooling water tower, understand when the chemicals were getting consumed and what the quality of the cooling water was, and allow the facility manager to pull this up on a cell phone. I'll never forget one particular facility manager talking to me as voice of customer. His verbatim was, "I'm tired and I worry all the time." And that became our mantra, is this needed to be one less thing on the huge pile of things a facility manager had to worry about, and that would keep him up at night. So that is fully commercial now and successful. And you can look on Buckman Labs and see it's called Acumen. There's several platforms that support that. So these are all stories I wanted to tell them because we know how they turned out. Now I'd like to segue into my current challenge and the enjoyment that we're having building services from industries that operate at extremely high temperatures. So HWI, Harbison Walker, is a company that is focused on providing highly engineered linings for companies that are engaged in operations where they have to contain super hot liquids. And if you should lose containment, that is a devastating scenario. There's a lot of markets that use this, and you can see most of them are quite industrial. But the one which is responsible for the most volume for my company and other companies like us is iron and steel. And that's because it's such an aggressive environment. They can chew through a lining in a few weeks. In other applications, it may be a few months, a year, many years, or even a decade in some cases. But iron and steel consumes the most refractory because of the aggressiveness of their use. The world is changing for all of our customers, and certainly iron and steel. And this provides the opportunity for us to step in and serve them in a new way. This is probably not a big surprise to anyone on this call, but a steel manufacturing firm ran on its experts before, and those people are retiring in droves. It's difficult, if not impossible, to hire someone who comes with experience. And even young people to be trained are choosing other fields other than working in a steel manufacturing plant. Go figure. If you do hire them, the processes are extremely complex. And we have done an ethnographic voice of customer there. We know that it can take 10 years to train someone to the point where they really know their business. And then even when they're wandering around, the less experienced person is at risk in a steel plant. It's an aggressive environment, and keeping people safe in some way, shape, or fashion means keeping them off the operating floor. The steel plant has a capital budget, but it's limited, and they put it to their uses that are highest aligned with making steel. And refractories are not their core experience. Steel plants used to have refractories groups, but those people no longer exist, and they're relying more and more on the knowledge of suppliers. And much like my friend, the facility manager, the plant manager of a steel plant lacks peace of mind, but desperately wishes he had it. Can't sleep at night. This is where our opportunity as a refractory supplier comes in, is we can bring decades and generations of refractory expertise, such as the steel plant operators could never dream of. We've also had to learn and become deeply familiar with their process knowledge, how the refractory interacts with the molten steel. They know us well, especially in the United States, where most of the steel companies have our products. And we do have the ability to be able to manage this process. So as part of the advanced services group parlance, we could call this refractories as a service, or perhaps in customer language, more like worry-free vessel containment. And these pieces of the solution speak to the needs that are coming up on the customers. And what we need to do now is show them how we could play in a different place than they're used to us being in their operation. So our expertise moves from being our products, our differentiated, highly value-added products, to our expertise. This becomes the true value that we're bringing. We do have services within the company right now, but they probably top out at best at performance advisory, and we'd really like to move up that chain, tie ourselves to customer outcomes, which are highly valuable. Even a minute's worth of steel production is worth a lot. So that would be a much better way of value capture for what we're trying to accomplish. We're still fairly early in the journey, and I think we would agree that we're somewhere around the engagement phase, where we're doing trials, both technical and business experiments, to get in there and present ourselves and our story and see how we can penetrate with this new concept to the steel industry of having their refractory manufacturer actually manage the processes and the outcomes that come from those unit ops that use refractory. And this is well underway, and we're expecting to see some success there. And then, like Kate, I'd just like to wrap up with a few observations, being a woman in servitization and an introvert, by the way. I think it's a challenging and rewarding career option. There's two basic ways you can play this game, depending on what your style is. One is for people that walk into a well-established service business. This is a great opportunity for the classic MBA mindset, because it requires an enormous amount of business acumen as it relates to services, which is nothing like business acumen as it relates to products. In fact, it's quite a different mindset. Then you have to continuously be improving the scope and the scale of your business, and improving the margin, while you keep an eye on scenarios that could allow you to be blindsided, which can happen quite easily. I've mostly been on the building new service business, and this is, again, it's a type of person that thrives on creating what doesn't exist. And you're going to have to wear many hats when you do that, because you're just not going to have that deep portfolio of people that can support you. You have to influence people more when those people are from a product mentality and they haven't seen the advanced services mentality at work, or seen the financial results that it brings. Manage many moving pieces, and be very comfortable with something that doesn't have strong guidelines. It's honestly a very fuzzy front end, and you have to manage risk, but that's what you do. You will be the one bringing the discipline, visualizing the journey, and delivering the results. So that's really where I wrap up my personal and Harbison Walker story, and turn it over now to Ian, who will facilitate our question and answer session.
Nancy, thank you very much for that. And to Kate and Paula, I think you've done a fantastic job of setting the context, but also providing some of the open pathways that exist. Can I just perhaps share a couple of things to start with, and then we'll move into the questions. There's a number of constant threads that I've picked up through the three presentations. One is that you're always looking out for opportunity. you're always considering things as a value pathway. So how do you do more than just provide a product or more than just provide a service? But I think it's also about listening to that voice of the customer. I think both Kate and Nancy, I think the voice of your customer plays such an important role in your respective industries. Having that ability to put that into a new business model is very powerful. And I think the other thing that kind of struck me, Nancy, in your own four-stage career, your entrepreneurship type role, is that it mapped very neatly onto the 4 stages of our transformation roadmap. So I think when you see that growth coming through, I saw that replicated in your own career path. So let me open up to the questions now. And maybe, Kate, if I can come to you first of all. The first question is about, with such an attractive and innovative business model, what do you find to be the bottlenecks in industry for a wide adoption of servitization? There's some supplementary parts to that about why don't manufacturers adopt this model, knowing very well it has a competitive advantage. So perhaps if I can start with you, then I'll come to you, Nancy, and then Paula.
Oh, okay. I think there are certain bottlenecks that probably stand for any different types of manufacturers moving in this direction, and that they would stem around there being a slightly different buying process typically. So we might deal with a maintenance manager, let's say today, who looks to find a more reliable printer, and that's a fairly straightforward discussion, and there are some considerations around performance, but ultimately the purchase could be completed by one individual rather than where we're talking about a complete service that might have some benefits for the customer in terms of their product quality, their total operational efficiency, or their total cost of ownership over time. Those discussions might need to involve other parties, maybe better understood by more senior decision makers. Maybe they can be therefore a bit slower to close, or a little bit more complicated to find the right people and have those discussions. So I think that sort of thing is probably quite common across different types of companies that are going into this area. Then you might have some bottlenecks that are unique to the solution that you're trying to provide. So in the case of printing equipment, there are challenges sometimes to being able to actually read the output of a printing device on a very high speed line in challenging conditions. So there could be within a factory dust, food particles, moisture, liquids used in washdown, and all sorts of other things that complicate the technical solution that you actually provide. So that can be a bottleneck in terms of just the development of the technical solution, and how easily it can fit within different customer environments. So there might need to be multiple different packages of different elements that you can pull together. But I think, yeah, for more broadly, you might find those bottlenecks either within the customer in terms of being open to discussion on how they might take that service, or even within your own business where there's a group that has either a reason to want to stick with the current model because that's how they feel comfortable to sell the service, or rather sell the product. That's how things have always been. So there's a certain amount of change management that you always need to do, and that can be a bottleneck in itself. So finding, I think, people that can help you to free up the bottlenecks within the business is key, and then finding customers who are open to do something a little bit different with you, and then using them to open further doors is probably a sensible way to overcome those.
That's great. Thank you, Kate. And Nancy, the same question about potential bottlenecks for the wider adoption of servitization within industry?
Well, Kate gave a very comprehensive answer, and I think that that is what I would have said as well. I might add that just building on what she said about who you end up selling to, there are people within organizations that you have to avoid because they've been trained on purpose to deconstruct anything, and they don't want to buy on value. The idea that you, the supplier, might make more money, and they feel that that would come out of their hide somehow, and that they would somehow being paid more for the same thing, even though you've got a scenario laid out that shows that that's not the case. The best thing is to avoid that. And I know I'm repeating to some extent what Kate was saying, but I wanted to pull that out. I think that's very important, is that there are people out there that are actively working against value add and trying to drive everything to commodity because they think that's the best way to save their company money.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. Paula, anything to add over and above, or we could move on to a second question if you want?
No, I think I'd probably reinforce what they've said. I mean, certainly when we look at the partners that we work with, and that we've been working with for a number of years, there are a number of themes that perhaps emerge, and the whole thing about building the coalition within the business is particularly important. So making sure you've got very senior level, not just sign off, but buy-in, active buy-in, and then looking at how you build that coalition across all of the areas of the business. Because as we said right at the beginning, this is about business model innovation. It will affect the business model and therefore impact the whole business. So you have to be very clear about the challenges that you're going to face. In that, there are tools that we use that can support with that, but you do have to be very aware of that right from the very start. The challenging for finance and financing, the challenges for sales folk, and how that will impact on different business units isn't to be underestimated. Can be overcome, but that very first stage where you are considering how you're going to go about this and planning for that is going to be critical, as is running pilots with a particular customer is going to give you some evidence to continue to build that buy-in in your company.
Okay, thanks, Paul. You just mentioned something there, Paula, that struck. I think we're looking here at the role of women in servitization, but I think it's worth saying that it's not just about technical roles, because we are seeing more and more engagement from the finance groups within organizations. We're seeing it from the contracting teams. We're seeing it from procurement teams. So there's all the functions that you have within the organization. It doesn't necessarily have to be a technical specialism. So I think that's helpful. I think there's a comment that we've got from Francisco Garcia. You girls are a great example. I hope you can help other women to succeed in this journey. My full admiration and support for your great work and consistency. Thank you. So a nice recognition from Francisco there on that one. One question we've got next is asking, does the panel think that there are any particular changes to how recruitment into servitization is done, especially for women? And let me go back. Maybe Nancy, anything on recruitment, then I'll come to you, Kate, and then with Paula again.
Well, I think that people are starting to recognize it and call it out as part of the skill set that they're advertising for and looking for, and that never used to happen before. So when I think about changes, I think about the recognition, the broad recognition across industry that this is a trend that's not going away, and actively looking for people who are prepared to deal with that. The other thing that I think is a bit of a change is just that we've had the pandemic now. We have remote work. Servitization lends itself pretty well to alternative working arrangements that are attractive, I would say, especially to younger workers who are coming in at earlier points in their career. These are flexible, interesting jobs that can be done from a variety of locations, because they do have, you wear so many hats that often it doesn't benefit you to sit in one particular spot at one particular desk, and that's an attractive feature, I think.
Okay, thanks, Nancy. Kate, anything to supplement or add to that?
I think in our case, it can be advantageous to look for people who might come from industries where we know that there's some focus on outcomes already, and that there's therefore an understanding of how those sorts of business models will work and benefit the organization, and you perhaps can get a greater sense of buy-in. But typically, even if that's not part of the experience, then it comes back to some of those points that Nancy raised in her slides, which was, it was being able to cope with uncertainty. And I think we've actually been quite clear about that in the job specs that where we've recruited for roles that are specific to developing advanced services. You must be able to cope in an environment of change. It's not for everyone. That some people do prefer the structure and process that come with more established roles, but in this environment, if you're open to innovation and change and new process development and things, then those are the sorts of attitudes that we'd be looking for in this area.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you, Kate. And Paula?
This is an interesting one for me, actually, because sitting in an organisation that observes servitization being applied in the workplace, within companies, it's quite interesting to see the different mixes of people within different teams. And I think one thing I've observed is that you see a slightly different approach in some cases where you've got a more diverse team working on this. And I have seen examples of where you've got more women in the room having conversations about this, where they've pivoted the discussion in such a way that's helped them to overcome particular barriers. And again, without any grand stereotypes, it kind of comes back a little bit to what Kate was saying at the very beginning, is that there's value in having a different voice at the table that might help you overcome some of those barriers that typically you always come up against, particularly when you're talking about needing to empathise or get over particular personalities or issues of silo working, etc., that you're struggling to implement a large-scale change like this.
Okay, can I stick with you then, Paula? There's a question here about digitalization, and perhaps that's maybe something you could roll into. But in your opinion, how the digitalization is helping servitization as a key issue to success? So where are you seeing the role of digital enhancing and accelerating change?
Yeah, well, I don't know if the audience remembers that the staircase at the beginning. When you're looking at the top of the staircase, it's really all about digital. It's all about monitoring, about data, about analysing and collating that, about looking at who owns that, how you use it, how that links to your customer, etc. And increasingly, our partners are seeing this as being a particular question for them. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a problem, but it is a particular question for them. And again, I know just from our links back into Aston University that there are lots of very interested data scientists around who want to look at expanding their knowledge and how they can apply their skills. And those are both male and female. So I think in terms of career pathways, there are options there to think about how you apply what you've learned through data-related activities back into servitization, in helping to interpret what the benefits are and expand on the value proposition that you're offering to your customers.
Okay, thank you, Paula. This is maybe one for Nancy and Kate, I think in that order, but Joanna's asked about where would you recommend a person looks if they were looking for a role in servitization or product as a service, noting that there are hardly any job postings for such positions. Where would they be best looking?
That's an interesting question. Certainly the word servitization is not being used, but I find that the overlap with innovation is extremely high. And that when people talk about innovation and roles that have that key word, that covers a lot of things, and it will, in this day and age, it will almost certainly cover innovative business models like total care. And it will probably also have a theme of digitalization in that as well. So you're right that it's a difficult one to scout for, but it's also possible to join LinkedIn groups, and those groups can sometimes help you navigate. There's really, I don't think, any industry that doesn't have these positions, regardless of how they articulate it. But certainly it's the way things are trending and going. I would recommend it, actually any kind of B2B type enterprise, I think would do it. I myself come from the chemical industry and the refractories industry, and certainly it's a theme in those sectors.
Okay, thanks, Nancy. Kate?
Yeah, I'd add to that. It's looking for what language is used that's used to describe this sort of process. So managed services, for instance, might be a phrase that comes up, or in fact, in the, something as a service. Those sorts of phrases are far more common, and therefore might lead you to businesses that are packaging their offers in that sort of way, and to the roles that might be available around those. There are certain industries that are more likely to have servitized offers. In print, managed print has been around in the office print industry for quite some time. So there might be little pockets like that are worth exploring, if that's really the area that you're looking for. So having a look at some of the companies that of, the Rolls Royces of this world that publicize what they're doing, can be a foot in.
Thank you, Kate. And Paula, we've got a lovely question coming in your direction shortly. So can I just check, Nicole, I can see that you're as part of the panel. I'll ask Paula a question, and then perhaps if there's anything you'd like to say about your group, please feel free to do so. Paula, this is one that I think you're going to really enjoy. One of our delegates is saying that there should be a global servitization fund earmarked for OEM industries, and that may incentivize them to come to the table and be educated on the subject and tap into the subject. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. I mean, in fact, we are working with Aston University at the moment on some research looking at tracking the impact of servitization within businesses, and looking at what the contribution is to the UK, and the potential impact of the future, with a view to possibly exploring something like that further down the line. Because we know that just on the basis of the conversations that we are having every week with large and small businesses about reconsidering their business model, that they need to have the time and expertise, need to be able to spare the time and expertise to be able to consider this. So that's something we'd be really interested in, absolutely.
Okay. Would that change mindset, Nancy, within Calderas at HWI?
If there were
If there was a fund to encourage you to come to the servitization table?
I think that the company would still be motivated by internal drivers as to that. Taking advantage of funds that are available out there is a great thing, but we would probably look to government funded programs that support uses in our industry, and there are some that would drive us more to the solution.
Okay, thank you. And maybe just checking with Kate, anything that you think would be different if there was money on the table to incentivize you?
I think we could potentially encourage some of the partners that we work with to be more involved, if that were the case. I echo Nancy's sentiment that Domino's seen the value in this for many years, and we are fully committed to that direction. But maybe we would get some more partners throughout the value chain to work more closely with us, if that were the case.
Okay, thank you. And I think I'm delighted Christina in the background has been slowly navigating her way through the closing slides. So I think we have about 15 seconds left of our hour. So it just leaves me to thank Paula, to thank Kate, and to thank Nancy for your inputs. And as always, our guests online, and for Christina behind the scenes for a fantastic work. Thank you very much, everyone.